Yes, Tom Popik, Foundation for Resilient Societies.
And this mic also works if you need it.
Okay, thank you. So I'm really pleased to introduce our panel today, starting out with Andrea Boland, who was recently a state representative for Maine and the author of a really pivotal bill for our movement, an EMP protection bill for the state of Maine, which ended up causing a very extensive study of EMP protection for Maine, and really I think has national implications. William Harris, who is the attorney for the Foundation for Resilient Societies and truly an expert in both federal and state regulation of electric reliability. And then Ambassador Hank Cooper, who has a really unique experience base in the state of South Carolina in regards to National Guard involvement in resiliency, including resiliency of the electric grid. So that's our panel today, and I think we're going to have some really interesting things to say. I believe first in the lineup is Bill Harris.
Thank you. So we're running late on the schedule. I will just try to give a brief overview of some opportunities and synergies between federal and state regulation, why more can be done at the state level, sometimes at the local level, and in compacts among states. So I had some view graphs. I don't know if they're available.
Is Chuck here?
I don't know where this is.
For the AV people, we're wondering if you can put up the slides for our panel. We have about 8 of them or so.
Okay. Well, then we'll do it without slides.
Sure.
So basically, one key slide I just provided as a reference, and it will be in the materials, I believe, of the proceedings, was just the savings clause of the Energy Policy Act of 2005, at which basically, I won't quote the whole thing, but it basically says, nothing in this section shall be construed to preempt any authority of any state to take action to ensure the safety, adequacy, and reliability of electric service within that state, as long as such actions is not inconsistent with any reliability standard, except that the state of New York may establish rules that result in greater reliability. I'll stay away from that for now, but that does provide a special opportunity for experimentation in New York State. So the states have an opportunity when they permit a power plant to consider safety or reliability or adequacy, and adequacy could be adequacy given some contingencies that are adverse, like the gas-electric interdependence or loss of capability in a solar storm, that sort of thing. So that's there. Then I just point out there's an Edison Electric Institute handbook available online called State Generation and Transmission Siting Directory, etc. The last edition is October 2013. So you could look online for your state to see what you can do there. I'd also point out some states give special authority to local municipalities. So Colorado, Maine, New Jersey, Texas, and Vermont give extra authority for municipalities. So a municipality might decide if there's a new transmission facility going there that they want a geomagnetic induced current monitor if it happens to be in a site. That means it's possible they could require that. If there are new renewable resources that are connecting to the state's transmission system, they could require a GIC monitor, for example. They don't, the federal government's not requiring them in the current proposed NERC-FERC standard, but they could make a difference. And usually having the monitors is the first step toward deciding whether you want to buy the protective equipment. If you don't know the hazards at your site, you're most unlikely to buy it. So that's one area where states can act. Then following up on what Commissioner Mueller said about the interstate gas pipeline system, the federal government has the authority to extend these interstate gas pipelines, but they happen not to have any authority to regulate the reliability of the interstate gas pipeline system. It turns out no one in the federal government does that. So there has not been a preemption by the federal government of state authority. So a state that is converting rapidly from coal to natural gas, a state like Colorado, for example, might decide that they will not permit expansion of capabilities if there are not a requirement for failover gas-electric compressors. Because right now, about 6% of the nation's gas compressors are electric only. And people didn't care in the past, and it's a relatively new development. But it turns out if you lose your electric power, then you lose the gas flow to power your electric plant, and you get a downward spiral. So probably we'd be heading toward about 10% electric only if there weren't regulations. But there are now products where you can buy gas-electric failover systems with smart SCADA devices that will actually pick the lower cost for the particular time of day and the particular season of the year. So these fancier compressor systems pay their own way, but they're not being implemented at a fast rate. And if we're concerned about enhancing reliability, that's an example of what a state could do. A state could just require more reliability in the state. Then let me turn to the Clean Power Plan briefly. This is a plan that was proposed in June of 2014 by EPA, and it will force a more rapid transition from coal-fired electric generation to natural gas, on top of all the other transitions happening anyway. If we have that happen, we're going to be losing a large share of electric generation that has the fuel on site. We basically have nuclear with fuel on site, and we've had coal with fuel on site, and we're going to just-in-time, long-distance delivery of natural gas with preemption by heating customers ahead of the power generation. So this is an opportunity for the states, but also for regions. So the studies that have been done in the last 6 months show that if the states work together through regional planning, and EPA might allow them to do this, they can allocate which power plant transitions away from coal, and they need not do it state by state. They could do it by region. So they could end up with higher reliability and saving billions of dollars at the same time. So there's an example where states have authority to act on their own if this plan is implemented, or they can work in a group. So the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative has 9 states. Pennsylvania may join them. And they've saved a lot of money and improved their energy efficiency by working together and having an emissions trading market. So I just briefly mentioned there are some areas where there's federal preemption. The siting of liquefied natural gas facilities, the licensing of nuclear power plants, and the expansion of the gas pipelines. Those have federal preemption. But generally, states have much more authority than they've been utilizing. So the standard under the Federal Power Act involves safety, reliability, and adequacy. But under many state laws, they only refer to safety. And some of the state laws don't refer to reliability. So the states could just change that on their own and give reliability a higher value in the state decision-making process. So I won't take any more time because we're running behind, but the basic message is there's a synergy, last thought, the synergy between the states and the federal government is shown in Maine, because Maine, and Representative Boland and her colleagues, demanded that Central Maine Power produce the records of geomagnetic storms monitored at Chester, Maine, and the outages. We have more than 20 years of data, which is now helping us improve the federal standard, which is under consideration. So it's not just that the feds help the states can help the feds. Thank you.
So Bill Harris really had some excellent remarks. He obviously has a deep understanding of some of the regulatory and legal issues. I think one of the big takeaways is that electric generation is regulated at the state level, and because you can't have a functioning power grid without generation, there's a really important role for people who are active at the state level to make sure that generation is more reliable. We also have this issue, as Commissioner Moeller so amply talked about, that more of the generation is becoming gas-fired. And a lot of that gas comes through long pipelines, and some of the states are at the very narrow end of these pipelines. And so I'll give you several examples. The state of California at the end of a long pipeline, the state of Florida, which is basically a peninsula, also at the end of long pipelines, and then the New England region. Some of these regions are also at the end of long electricity transmission lines too. And when you look at the combined risk of long electricity transmission plus electric generation at the end of long pipelines, you can get a compounding of risks, which in some cases is quite extraordinary. So for example, the state of Massachusetts is 81% dependent on long-distance transmission, that's interstate transmission, or alternatively, electricity generation using interstate natural gas flows. So I think that is a really excellent example of this so-called just-in-time energy delivery. The takeaway here is we don't need an EMP event. We don't need a big solar storm. We don't need a cyber attack, and we don't need a physical attack either for there to be a catastrophic blackout if some of these issues aren't addressed. So as we go through each winter going forward, all of us in this cause will become increasingly important in terms of both electric reliability and, as Frank Gaffney talked about previously, also the issue of resilience. And so now I'm going to turn it over to Andrea Boland, who's been very active at the state level, and I think she can talk about the detailed reality of some of these issues at her state's level.
Well, I'm sorry to make two appearances here before you today, but continuing on from what I had said before about our concerns with the NERC influence on state policy making, and it being quite disappointing because their standards, their profile is quite low as far as an event, the power of an event would be. They want to just have to meet a standard of, say, maybe a D+ if you're in school, and we're hoping for at least a B+, and that's kind of been a problem. One of the things, though, that I wanted to just mention to you, and I'm really feeling kind of disabled by not having the slides here because I'm not sure how well my memory will serve me, but one of the things that I noticed, and of course I'm not a scientist or an engineer or a physicist or any of that, I've just been trying to follow it as best I can, which is a trick, even at the time. So I've relied on folks around me to help me with that. But you heard Curtis Birnbach earlier allude to John Kapperman, who's considered perhaps our best space weather analyst in the country, certainly highly knowledgeable about. Oh, great. Okay. So this is, okay, so I've done my introduction. Here's what I was looking for. Okay, I just wanted to show you a few slides. So the work that he has pointed out, he and Curtis Birnbach, who you heard from before, in some of their work has shown that they've taken, they're pointing out the work of other national experts who have taken information and guessed what, I shouldn't say guessed, they've really take pride in being able to validate what they show, whereas we don't see that happening with NERC in a credible way anyway. In the incident of a couple of different storms, showing the threshold to which these storms rise being 4,000 to 5,000 nanoteslas per minute, which I'm not going to try to explain. But it's a measure. We can all understand pictures. Whereas this is what NERC's storm profile would be. This is what we could expect to experience in the red, and this is what NERC would like us to take as a satisfactory goal here. They don't use real data, it doesn't seem, at least that we've been able to have explained to us in Maine. And then the next slide, if you want to operate that to. Oh, no, it isn't. We back it up. This one. Okay, so what these experts do is they work with the best data they can find, take all their years of experience and expertise and analyze it and come up with what we had seen before. What the possibility would be, however, is where all these circles are, is to look at the geomagnetically induced current as it's measured in about 100 or more places across the country. That would be something appropriate to use, I would think. But we don't see evidence of that being used. It, I would guess, would cause us to have a higher standard. But that's what's available, and that's what some folks have done, including Tom and John Kaplan from Maine. And then we have just 2 more slides. The next one, okay, they're out of the order I thought they were in. Okay, this, and I hope you can see this well enough. There are 2 blue lines on, 2 lines on this graph. In the one on the left, it shows the modeling done by these independent experts and what they came up with. What they came up with was actually the red line. What the NERC profile, consistent with the one before, is the blue line. You will see the circle there represents a big difference between what NERC, for instance, would suggest that we worry about and what these independent scientists have done. That's their modeling. That's the quality of the modeling that they do. On the right, there's another graph that shows actual incidents. And again, the blue line is NERC's, which shows a much more modest effect of the solar storms on the grid. This is what the actual measured data shows. It's very similar to what you see on the left, and you can see that the peaks are more extreme. So I just wanted to show you, we've got experts that do very high quality modeling that works out to be quite consistent with the actual measured data because of the care that they give it. And what NERC shows us is a much lower standard. This is simply a conclusion that they had in one of the studies with Kaplan and Birnbach, and I'll just read it to you because I'm not sure you can see it from where you sit. In conclusion, the NERC standard has been defectively drafted because the standard drafting team has chosen to use data from outside the United States and which excludes important storm events to develop its models instead of better and more complete data from within the United States or over not disclosed or over more important storm events. GIC data, in particular, is in the possession of electric utilities and EPRI, but not disclosed or utilized by NERC for standard setting and independent scientific study. The resulting NERC models are systematically biased toward a geomagnetic storm threat that is far lower than has been actually observed and could have the effect of exempting United States electric utilities taking appropriate and prudent mitigation actions against geomagnetic threats. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. In essentially, the profile, the NERC profile, is 2 to 4 times lower than what's been observed. And in addition to that, there is usually built in a safety factor of 2 to 4 times that. So it's way off from where it really should be for major infrastructure that we expect to have a long life. I just wanted to point that out to you. Thank you.
So Andrea Boland really did an excellent job explaining what could be technically complex. I think there's a couple takeaways. She has an extraordinary talent for distilling something which is complicated into language which regular people can understand and appreciate. That'd be number one. Number two, this situation with NERC understating the solar storm threat is so egregious that everybody in the society really should be able to get this. And with that, I'll introduce Ambassador Hank Cooper, who has some really exciting things to talk about in regards to initiatives in his home state of South Carolina.
Thanks, Tom. I'm not, Tom, I asked Tom how much time I had, and he said I had 5 minutes. And there are 2 or 3 things I want to say before getting to the one chart I have on South Carolina. First of all, I'm sorry I wasn't here to hear Senator Johnson this morning. But I want to say that based on conversations that another colleague and I had with him a month or so ago, I think he's going to have a profound impact on Homeland Security matters, and I look forward to that. And on missile defense and EMP issues in particular as they apply to the Homeland Defense, Homeland Security agenda. The second thing I guess I want to say is that in case you don't know who I am and what I've done, 2 things. First of all, about 35 years ago, I oversaw most of the DOD hardening programs for electromagnetic pulse. And so I know what's involved in that matter and how difficult it is to actually maintain systems that are sufficiently hard that we had confidence that they could be used if the Soviets ever attacked us and the president wanted to retaliate. The problems were so difficult, for example, with the communication systems that we had no confidence in AT&T and our normal communication systems to work during those, so we had programs that built redundant, separate pathways for the President and the Commander of Strategic Air Command to communicate with the bombers and with others. And that's not a well-known fact. One of the individuals that you missed because he's had heart condition is bronchiectasis, and he oversaw the development of that program called GWEN. So they're real experts that, that are parts of our community. The third thing is that I, along the way, was a director of the Strategic Defense Initiative, so I know something about missile defense. Actually, I started working missile defense issues at Bell Labs in the early 1960s, so I'm very familiar with the technology, where it can go, and what it can do. The fourth thing is that my impression of this community's problem is that we face an existential threat from ballistic missile attack that can produce electromagnetic pulse. Most people want to ignore it. One of the most important things I did here while being here the last 2 days was Trent Franks yesterday morning when he observed that he recently read an important report and said the some authorities in Iran at least had acknowledged EMP as a part of their planning and how they would employ it. Put that together with the 1998 evaluation of the threat, and during that time period, the experience that was observed where Iran launched ballistic missiles off of vessels in the Caspian Sea. We have no defense against missiles launched from off our coast today. Put those two things together. And in particular, from the Gulf of Mexico, from the south, we have no defense. Associated with that is we have no defense against satellites that both North Korea and Iran have launched over the South Pole. People are debating in this town whether to build a site on the East Coast to defend against Iranian missiles coming over the North Pole toward us. But we're completely vulnerable to what they've already demonstrated as a capability of launching a satellite which has a payload capability sufficient to deliver a nuclear weapon 100 or so miles above the United States. You don't have to design anything to re-enter the atmosphere. You just set it off while it's up there, and it turns the lights off. And I have no confidence that the electric power grid is today survivable against that kind of a threat. Secondly, I don't have any confidence that anybody's going to harden the grid in the near term to deal with that issue, so I believe the only real alternative in dealing with the issue is missile defense. Now, if you do EMP hardening against that threat, as a byproduct, you get hardening against the solar threat. If you do only the hardening against the solar threat, as George Baker, I don't know whether he's talked or is going to talk about it, will tell you, you don't solve the problem for the nuclear EMP. So whatever the politics are in discussing this issue, you should understand that if you work the missile problem, you also work at least the solar problem. Not unrelated to that is the fact that if Iran decides it's going to attack the Great Satan, as they put it, they're not going to attack us only with that. You can fully expect that there'll be kinetic attacks like at Metcalf. And the other thing that Frank's talked about was they understand the electric power grid is a weakness that we have. So there's no reason to believe they won't target it, both with kinetic attacks, with cyber attacks. What order, that's up to them. They've thought these issues through, you can bet. They're technically sound people. So all of that put together says that we better wake up, America. Now, I came to the bottom line about 2 years ago that Washington simply was not going to work this problem. I'm completely frustrated by watching what goes on, and the NERC, FERC, and all of that mess is just part of the problem. I became persuaded that unless we get people at the grassroots, and by that I mean the local, state folks involved in this issue, we'll never deal with it. And personally, I believe the National Guard is the framework by which, if we invest our time correctly, we can pull things together in a way that really affects all of America. And I just want to, if you show me the one chart, one reason why I believe that's so and the role that South Carolina can play. The two individuals who came to our, can I have the next chart, please? If you don't have to read it. You can read it later. We had a couple of guardsmen who came to the conference the last couple of days because we're planning to do an exercise down there, and I expect to get some of the key people in this room to come and explain these issues to the folks at home. They don't understand, I suspect, like many people around the country, but it doesn't take long to explain to them that they have serious problems that they need to deal with, and the Guard can play an important role. How many of you know that the missile defense systems in this country are operated by the National Guard? Homeland Defense in Alaska and California, the National Guard is responsible for the operation of those systems. In South Carolina, we have a unit called the 263rd Air and Missile Defense Command in Anderson. It is a deputy, the commander's a two-star guardsman. He's also the deputy commander of 1st Air Force located at Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida. That command has a responsibility of the air defense of the entire continental United States, the Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico. So they're deputy to them. They're also deputy to 1st Army in Fort Sam Houston in Texas, which also reports directly to the commander of NORTHCOM. So networked together, the folks in South Carolina are tied into the defense of the entire country. And I believe if we can get our act together down there, we can begin to be a bit of glue to tie all of the institutions together to deal at least with the ballistic missile part of this threat. One of the reasons I'm interested in the Tyndall connection is that one of the smartest things I believe the country can do, and we're not doing, how many know what Aegis Ashore is? Does anybody know? Okay. We're deploying 2 sites in Europe to defend Europe against missiles launched out of Iran. One is in Romania, it will be operational within a few months. One will be in Poland, operational in 2018, I believe it is. And if we can afford to put sites like that over there to defend Europeans against Iran, it seems to me we could put them at military bases around the Gulf of Mexico to defend the United States people against threats from the south. And so I'm looking forward to going with the commander of the 263rd down to talk to, I think it's General Estes, who's a 3-star, about this issue, and in particular engaging in a serious way the deployment of a site down there to begin this kind of an active defense. There are a lot of other things that can go into this, and I look forward, I'll report back to you hopefully with some progress the next time we have a conference like this. Thank you. Questions?
So do we have at least one question from the audience? So again, rise and state your name. Thank you.
Bob Kamansky. I understand that Russia has naval elements in Cuba. Are you talking about our southern borders from that area? Was that a scenario?
Yes, if I had more time, I probably would have mentioned the fact that it's not so much Russian. North Korea moved a ship out of, where was it? It was in Cuba, I believe, through the Panama Canal, was stopped by the Panamanians last May or so. And it was carrying 2 SA-2s, if you're familiar with that. Those are nuclear-capable missiles that the Russians used during the Cold War. They didn't have nuclear weapons on board, but they were quite capable of carrying a weapon that could have produced an EMP effect. And they were stopped after, I think after they transited the canal. So this is a serious threat. It's not just hypothetical.
We have another question.
Michael Hain, Alliance for Vigilance. I understand that the Iranian Revolutionary Guard has been building missile bases in Venezuela. Would that be part of the need for the Aegis land-based defense? And could we use destroyers as an interim defense mechanism?
Yes, again, 5 minutes isn't much time to talk about all this. Venezuela and Iran have been working together on this kind of a threat. And if the president chose to put Aegis ships in the Gulf, he could. Of course, he directs the Navy. He's the commander-in-chief. But they don't normally go there, which is why I want them on military bases. If you talk to the Navy about stationing their ships, basically as, what do you call them, just tied to the coastal areas, they get very annoyed by that kind of instruction. Of course, they care about the defense of the American people, and in extremis they do that, but they don't want a mission of protecting our shores, per se. On the East Coast, last year, 2013, we checked the statistics, and on any given day at random, there were between 4 and 6 Aegis BMD ships along the eastern seaboard or in our ports. So we de facto have the capability, if we just simply train our crews to operate ships in a way that could provide the eastern seaboard a defense, and the same for the Pacific seaboard. But they don't operate in the Gulf of Mexico. And frankly, I would not advise anybody being a great advocate of having them station themselves in a picket ship role in the Gulf of Mexico. They wouldn't go for that. The Navy would kill it.
Any other questions? Okay, so oh yes, we have a question. Again, identify yourself, please.
My name is Yvette, town of Greenwich, and Connecticut. I have a question. I am very happy to be here, but I don't have the background many people having here. I'm a scientist, biologist, chemist, microbiology, so here is my question. In the past, I know that Cuba was having a strong relation with Russia. So is there any intelligent information that we are aware is Cuba is having a role in a missile projectile attack to us? I wonder if anyone know anything about it, because Cuba is kind of too close to us, and in the past they were a strong ally to Russia.
I don't really, in my own mind, attach a Russian threat particularly to the Cuban connection. Cuba's can be very annoying on its own without help from Russia. What worries me more than the Russians is it's the Iranian threat. You know, these people, the fanatics there, you call them whatever you wish, I call them jihadis, they want to kill us. I mean, if you bother to just read what they write repeatedly, not just, you know, as a by the by, they want to kill us. And they are happy to commit suicide just to kill a few infidels. So if they could kill a few million or a few 100 million Americans, what's the big deal of risking their own annihilation just to bring a ship close enough to attack us if they get, and when they get that capability? That's the threat that worries me more than any other, even more than North Korea. And the North Koreans, in my judgment, already have this capability. The Iranians are always present at the North Korean nuclear tests. Their technical people are. And many people, some really knowledgeable, key people, including, I think I've been reported that Bill Graham, who chaired the EMP Commission, and Johnny Foster, who himself was one of the preeminent nuclear designers and one of the last ones living, in fact, believe this is the case. So we're living on borrowed time, in my judgment, with respect to this threat.
George Anderson, one question. We have to leave in a second, but do we have enough Aegis ships afloat and still in service? Are they staying in service to do this?
There are 80 plus ships. I don't know what the exact number is now. It'll be 85 within a few months. Aegis cruisers deployed and destroyers deployed around the world. We have, I don't know, several in the Pacific, supporting our friends there with respect to the North Korean threat. We have ships among the 7th Fleet and the 5th Fleet around in the Mediterranean and the Indian Ocean and wherever. 6th Fleet, I guess it is, in the Med. But anyway, there are some 30 to 35 ships. I think it's growing to 35 by 2017 or so. And there are a total of something on the order of 70 or 80 capable ships that we can modify in a fairly short period of time for modest investments as compared to what we're spending on a lot of other things.
Okay, very good. Do I see one other hand? Okay, I'm wondering, Gail, do you have a moment, or you got to run out for a flight? Oh, you got to go. Okay, we have one question back here. Okay, we'll do one more question, and then I'll tell you what we're doing next in just a moment.
My name is Samar Chatterjee, SAFE Foundation. Ambassador, you've called yourself ambassador, but you also have a military and defense background, you mentioned. Given that, and you said the federal government, military, and the president is not doing enough, now, why would you think they wouldn't be doing enough? And especially when you said the Iranians or North Koreans are a threat, I don't think, however much they may be crazy, they're not going to risk their own existence, because they may attack the United States, but the retaliation would be pretty bad. I mean, most people looking at United States track record of invading countries, it would be pretty bad. So I don't think they are that bad, and therefore I don't think the concerns that you have expressed doesn't impress me that much. Now, I'm not a Muslim, I'm a I'm from India and a Hindu. So given that, if we are not afraid, India is not afraid of these, I don't think U.S. should be that paranoid. I mean, including Cuba.
Well, I don't consider myself paranoid about this issue. I spent all my adult career worrying about the Soviets and the threats to our country. As I said, you're dealing with people who are quite prepared to commit suicide just to kill a few others. And you're dealing with leaders there. When I say leaders, I mean the Ayatollah. I don't mean the president, who is an apologist for their arms control negotiations. When they get the capability that they can literally level the playing field by destroying the United States, I believe they'll do it. And I think they will do maybe the Israelis first, but they'll come after us. I don't know why you wouldn't believe their doctrine any more than what the Russians really said. We deterred the Russians for the Cold War. Some people have serious doubts as to whether deterrence really worked, even during the Cold War, and whether or not we were just lucky. And by, I mean serious people who study these matters. But when dealing with the people who believe as they believe and have stated the things they state, act the way they do, you know, I just don't have confidence in relying the security of my family and my kids on hoping that they really won't attack us, which is what you're saying we should do.
We have another question in the back. Identify yourself, please.
Hi, Jack Pressman. I'd like to just add something. I can tell you firsthand that the 3 countries outside of the United States that are actively designing and building EMP protection are the South Koreans, the Israelis, and India. And the Indians view this as a very serious threat. They have very bad neighbors, and they do not view EMP as something secondary. They view it as a primary risk to their country. The new Prime Minister has put this top on the list. So this whole matter of EMP protection amongst our close allies has become a very, very senior issue in their defense protection planning.
And let me just say, since you asked it specifically, I think some of our leaders are just irresponsible. I'll just say it that frankly. As I said earlier, I've lost any confidence in Washington dealing with this issue, which is why I believe we have to go back to the states and work the issue there and build it from the bottom up.